Chapter 4, July 15, 2056. Samantha Cooper. Samantha Cooper is a 24-year-old, 5 feet 2 inches blonde woman from Texas. She is one of two people sitting the farthest any human being has ever been from Earth. She is sitting in the cockpit of a spaceship that has been built in 5 months and is now stationed in between the orbits of Mars and the asteroid belt. Samantha is sitting inside the command and control portion of the Goliath, which is sitting a good distance away from Miller's disk. The last 15 hours has been a lot of tedious work for Samantha. It has taken 8 months for Samantha and her companion Shyla to leave Earth's orbit and travel to this destination. Now in the next hour they would be the first to learn, and 27 minutes later the entire Earth would learn if their mission has been a success. The last 15 hours has taken its toll on both of them. Neither Shyla nor Samantha has slept in 20 hours. The Goliath was easily the largest spacecraft that human beings have ever built. It took over 100 separate launches from Earth to geosynchronous orbit to fully build the craft. 90% of the ship by weight is fuel. The Goliath needed an enormous amount of fuel to accelerate towards Miller's disk and then to decelerate to reach a zero-velocity position outside of Miller's disk. A little over half of the rocket fuel the Goliath had left Earth with is still in the craft's gigantic middle fuel tank. Then the rest of the fuel would be used on the return mission to get Shyla, Samantha and any samples or extra information they had learned back to Earth. The Goliath is an amazing engineering accomplishment for the human species. The Goliath is basically one giant engine. The engine is a giant cylinder that could either shoot its propellant out one side or the other. Attached at the middle of the cylinder was a spinning ring with spokes that attached to the center of the main engine. The majority of the living space for Samantha and Shyla is located in the spinning ring attached to the cylinder. The ring is spinning at the correct rate to simulate gravity inside of itself, and this is where Samantha and Shyla spent almost all their time. However, today, Samantha and Shyla are sitting side by side in the command and control portion of the ship. The command and control portion of the ship is nicknamed David. David is directly attached to the main engine of the Goliath. David is technically its own little spaceship with tiny thrusters and life support systems. It could be accessed by descending one of the spokes of the spinning ring and passing through an airlock to the non-gravity portion of the ship. It was a tiny cramped area that has no gravity and is mainly thought of as a fail-safe. Shyla and Samantha both agreed this is the worst place to have to work on the entire ship. One of David's technical requirements is that the command capsule is one of the most heavily shielded portions of Goliath, but the negative feature is that it is also the tiniest technically livable portion of the ship. Once strapped into their seats and the airlock is sealed, David could detach from the main body of Goliath's engines and maneuver in space around the bulk of Goliath's hull. When David is detached from Goliath's main power, it is capable of supporting 2 occupants for a significant amount of time. During their 8-month trip to Miller's disk, only once has Shyla had detached David from its docking clamps on Goliath's main engine and flown it to an access port on the main engine and done some maintenance on a low-flow fuel hose. During their trip to Miller's disk, Samantha and Shyla had both been required on 2 different occasions to live for a time inside of David when they had passed through a series of solar storms on their way to the disk. David had extra shielding built into its hull compared to most of the hull of the Goliath. This extra shielding prevented most of the physically damaging charged particles from the solar storms from passing through Samantha's and Shyla's bodies inside the cockpit. The 2 occasions where Samantha and Shyla had to live in their spacesuits seated next to each other inside of David had been terrible. For 2 entire days they had been required to live inside of David. However, on this day neither Samantha nor Shyla complained at all about being stuck inside of David for the foreseeable future. David is a tiny spacecraft with 2 seats facing a series of curved video touchscreens. Above the screens are the only 2 small portions of any part of the Goliath that has windows to space. Outside of the windows, Samantha and Shyla both saw Miller's disk sitting there. They had both spent the last 10 hours inside of David piloting one of their EVA drones with the cube of liquid hydrogen to the flat surface of Miller's disk and had left it there. On the flat side of Miller's disk sat the precious cargo that Samantha and Shyla has spent the last 1 year of their lives bringing to the middle of space. It is a very small cube sitting on a huge perfectly flat circle in the middle of space. Shyla was born in Bombay, India. She is 30 years old. She is a tiny woman barely 5 feet tall and has never weighed more than 100 pounds. One of the reasons she was chosen for this mission is her height and weight. However, the main reason she is chosen is because of her education. She is in all likelihood one of the greatest engineers living today. She has a wide-ranging knowledge of almost all the engineering degrees. She has mostly excelled in mechanical engineering, but her expertise is wide-ranging. Her father had been an airline pilot and taught her how to fly. Because of her flying abilities, her part of the mission is also to be the pilot. Being the pilot on the Goliath didn't really mean anything. Everything on the Goliath is computer-controlled to a precise degree. However, being the pilot had allowed her to fly the drone with the cube to Miller's disk and leave the cube there. After dropping off the cube, she has flown the small drone back to the drone bay on the outside of David's hull and locks it in place. Shyla is staring into her screen mounted in front of her pilot's chair and set into her mic on the inside of her space helmet. Delivery successful. Drone 1 secured in David's drone bay. Cube number 1 has been placed on the flat side of Miller's disk. T-37 minutes to activation. Samantha replies quickly, perfect. We are receiving a data packet from Earth. She paused and then continued to read out loud from her screen. To astronauts, there are 3 main parts of the data packet. First, Goliath's communication encryption has been cracked. All communications from Goliath are now assumed to be made public in real time. Second, please seal all hatches and airlocks. Return all gases and liquids to their appropriate storage receptacles. Third, begin removing power from non-essential systems. Top off batteries with excess power, then retract solar panels to their stowed configuration. This will be the last communication from NASA and Earth until after activation. All eyes of humanity are on you. Shyla smiles and turns her helmet to Samantha. The first part is new, but I have already started working on the last 2 as scheduled through our flight plan. Batteries are at 98% and will be at 100% in 25 minutes. After that, I will retract the solar panels, which will take 10 minutes. All airlocks have been sealed and I have begun to compress and reliquefy our atmosphere in the habitat ring. All current liquids have been sealed in their containers. She paused and clicked her mic to the private channel for only her and Samantha. She then spoke in a hushed tone. Out of habit, since Goliath's external communication encryption has been broken, we should probably be more careful about what we say on the public channel. Activation is in 36 minutes. After the solar panels are retracted and the atmosphere from the ring has been reliquefied, we will need to spend the next available time checking and rechecking all vital systems to make sure they are in the green. This will leave us 1 minute to stare out our windows and try to think of something heroic to say. Samantha has spent months trying to think of something to say. Her guiding star has always been Neil Armstrong's famous quote, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." She has workshopped various quotes with Shyla. There has even been a team of NASA copywriters that has come up with hundreds of government-approved quotes she could choose from. She has never liked any of them. Her plan is to just pick one and say it. The leading contender is, as humanity steps forward into the unknown, we leap forward with open arms. After spending the next 36 minutes checking and rechecking all their systems, they are both happy to report all systems are still in the green and operating within specifications. The batteries are at 100% and the solar panels have finished retracting and are locked in place. Samantha and Shyla sat in silence. They sat there in silence, staring at their screens with the windows to Miller's disk above their screens. The Goliath has been prepared to the best of everyone's abilities for the unknown. There is no sound coming from the Goliath at all. All non-mission critical items such as engines, air circulators, fans and pumps have been turned off. All of Goliath's thousands of sensors along with most of its external observation drones are facing Miller's disk. These sensors did not make any noise. The only sound is coming from a small fan on the inside of each of Samantha and Shyla helmets that circulated the oxygen in their spacesuits. The activation began. Samantha and Shyla have still not said anything. Samantha and Shyla are so focused on their screens, watching the energy output of the disk grow, neither of them remember to say their heroic quote. They sat in silence till the full 3-minute activation has completed. The energy output of the disk on their screen suddenly dropped to 0. Shyla is staring at the mountains of data that was streaming across her screen. Samantha looks up from her screen to the window. The cube of diamond is still sitting on Miller's disk. Nothing has happened to the cube in her eyes. She had meant to flick her mic to private, but she accidentally flipped it to the public setting. "Damn it," was all Samantha uttered to the entire Earth. Samantha had always secretly hoped that it was some kind of galactic gate that would suck the Goliath to a new galaxy. Samantha could not see with her own eyes through the window what Shyla was seeing on her screen. The data streaming to Shyla's screen would be some of the most analyzed data ever recorded. What the data told and what Goliath's thousand of sensors has detected is that the liquid hydrogen has disappeared, and directly next to the now empty diamond cube is a pile of what looks like 125 marble balls. Shyla had always secretly hoped that nothing would happen. Shyla's mic is on the public setting already, and she simply begins to utter as humanity steps forward into the unknown, it is at that moment that the 3,125 marble balls immediately attached themselves to the diamond cube and then did what everyone later described as consumed it. The marble balls immediately double in size to 6,250 balls and are now a larger cube. Shyla didn't finish the rest of the quote because her mic had suddenly stopped working. The only other noise has also stopped. The tiny fan on the inside of her helmet that recirculates her oxygen has also stopped functioning. Samantha and Shyla both immediately lost consciousness.